it to happen so far. So it'll be interesting to see the way it develops. I read a newspaper article a few weeks ago, and some economists said that if you were to legalize it, and again, I'm not necessarily promoting that because right now it's illegal in New York State, but if you were to legalize it, it would make the United States or save the United States government trillions of dollars.
Yeah, locally we could balance the budget on that, believe me.
Yeah, and also the lives of so many shattered people and killings because of it.
Well,
But they could vote.
But here's the other thing. I mean, if you look at it logically from a criminal justice perspective, let's say you were to do it, how do you then incorporate something like, although we have DWI laws that prevent you while driving while intoxicated on drugs or impaired by drugs, you'd have to deal with all that as well. And not to say that we couldn't as a society, but it's something that you would have to look at before you were to make that step.
Yeah, there are other things to be considered.
And here's the other issue, if it's some people may advocate and say, well, if we're going to legalize marijuana, can we then legalize cocaine, and should we legalize heroin, and can we legalize methamphetamine, and these what would be considered more hardcore drugs? I mean, where do you draw that line? And I'm not meaning to advocate one way or the other where you draw that line. My job is to prosecute the crimes that are on the books, and right now marijuana is one of them, so it's my responsibility to do it.
Thank you, caller.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Yeah, it's a hell of a problem is all I can say. They claim, a number of people claim that's the highest cash brought into Chautauqua County for a crop is marijuana. They grow an awful lot of it up in the hills. Joe runs around with his helicopters trying to locate them, but it's pretty hard to spot them. A couple of plants here, a couple of plants there. And I've understood that once they find a few plants, they don't prosecute it because who the hell knows who put them there?
Well, oftentimes you can't locate the individual that's responsible for doing it. They'll do it out on state land, and they'll do it. There's no way to connect anyone to it.
Right. So at any rate, pot goes on. Highest cash crop in Chautauqua County so far. Beats grapes even, they tell me. But the questions are nutsy. And of course, we're talking about I talk about the slammer. You ultimately have to turn someone over to Joe Gerasi, who says, I ain't got room, I got no money, we've got problems here, gonna have to take patrol off the streets and whatever. And Westfield is saying, hey, if Westfield goes, our police department goes to another community, we need some kind of feedback here, some kind of money back, because it's costing us a lot of money, servicing towns and villages that don't have a police department. So it's all complicated. Pat Johnson did a show right along with yours, I remember, over at Fredonia.
At the university.
Yeah, he said this place is crazy or something like that.
I talked about the number of individuals, I believe, that are housed in the county jail that are there, I mean, for having committed a crime or pending a crime, but have, the number that have some sort of, mental problems in the jail. I mean, the sheer number of people that have issues, mental issues.
Yeah, and if somebody does have mental issues, they're bound eventually to create some kind of a crime. I mean, they're going to do something bizarre that's illegal. If nothing else, undress.
Well, I mean, I believe it all goes back to, the 1970s when basically New York State stepped in and they deinstitutionalized all the state mental facilities.
They shut them down.
They shut them down, and these people end up out on the street. And what's inevitable with that is there's going to be a percentage, not all, but there's going to be a percentage of those that end up in the criminal process, the criminal justice system. They're going to. And I think we're trying to become better at dealing with it, but the criminal justice system certainly isn't necessarily fully equipped to be able to handle it. Those people, you need to set them up in a process. We have now in Jamestown a mental health court, which is very similar to the drug treatment court, which allows us to get these individuals into a program, which hopefully by the time they're done with the program, they're able to manage their own lives and not commit any more crime. But it's going to be an ongoing problem for us as well.
Yeah, and it's not just a county problem, it's a state and federal problem. They claim that a good percentage of the prisoners are people who are just cuckoo. Crazy as I was starting to say something, house mouse, but I think you get the picture. There's a loon. They done something that's illegal because they're crazy, and they wind up in the mental institution now, which is jail.
Right, and it's difficult for us as well because, of course, most crimes require intent, And if someone has a mental disability, you're not always able to prove that they formed the intent to commit the crime. So they end up lingering in the system a little bit, and the system isn't necessarily, capable of dealing with them efficiently, and oftentimes these people aren't receiving what they need to receive in order to be able to manage their lives. It's unfortunate.
I'd love to have Pat Johnson on the show. And the first question I would ask him is, what is being done in terms of therapy and help for the people who are cuckoo, who are in the jail system?
Well, the only thing that I can say through my office, what we do in conjunction with either private defense attorneys and or the public defender's office is we try to designate these people, and we try to orient them and get them channeled into drug treatment, or the mental health courts, if we can help it. Try to get them out and get them help. The issue really becomes problematic when you have individuals that are committing violent crimes and they have some sort of mental disability. That you can't always let them back out into society. That's not
Williams, for instance.
That's correct.
And Sean
That's
Williams.
Right.
You just don't want to let people like that.
Well, you look at the individual. It's still a pending case. Jason Wells, who killed the elderly woman up at One Temple Square in Fredonia, and he was housed there. He was receiving benefits. That was a HUD housing complex up there. You had the elderly, and you had people that may have been suffering from, some were receiving aid because of mental deficiencies that they may have had. I think it's a terrible mix. I'm not sure why the government allows those two to cohabitate, because the elderly, I think, poses a somewhat of a vulnerable population.
They're very easy victims.
And these people that sometimes have some mental disabilities don't recognize that. It's unfortunate.
Well, we have a county that is thriving, it's flourishing. We do have serious budget problems. We do have the ultimate beauty of the county, which brings in an awful lot of tourists. And you don't have much problem with the tourists, do you?
Oh, not particularly. You get the people that come into the Institute in the summer. Up where I live, which I grew up on Lake Erie, there's a couple of communities up there, Van Buren Bay and Van Buren Point, and I know that you were from Westfield, and some people come up there and use the lake.
I live right on the lake where the Sugar Shack is.
Oh, right. And it's beautiful. I believe that the best attribute that Chautauqua County has is its land and its waterways, and that's something I think we need to look to promote more.
Absolutely.
And we don't run into too many problems with the tourists. There's quite an influx in the summer, though. We get the population expands quite a bit.
Sure does. Chautauqua, among other places, goes from I think 400 people over there in the summer. It turns out 5,000 up.
Yeah, you'll get quite an increase.
Sometimes as many as 20,000.
And of course, we have Fredonia State, which increases the population of Fredonia quite a bit. And those students really across the board are pretty good. You're going to have issues with them like you have any time. Last weekend was Fredonia Fest, and there were some arrests made, and those kids went out there and did some foolish things like kids will do. But you manage it through the court systems. So long as it's not too egregious of a crime, a property crime or something like that, you try to set them on the right path and tell them you don't want to see them again, and you send them back and you don't ruin their lives. Of course, if they're doing something violent, you got to hold them to be responsible. So
put their feet to the fire.
Justice is a wide gap, and you need to be mindful. That's why, the discretion of myself and the discretion of my ADAs is paramount in what we do, I believe.
Especially as your staff shrinks. You've got to be more discreet.
Well, and that's part of the problem. Our caseload increases and the staff is decreasing. We're going to have to be very mindful about what we ultimately take to trial, what we prosecute, what cases we hold on to, and what cases we let go. It's going to become more difficult over time than it is right now.
Well, as the crime prosecution czar of Chautauqua County, what do you think of the change in the law now? When I was a kid, I could drink beer, have a beer with my dinner, or I could have a glass of wine at a nice restaurant at 18. Then suddenly, in their wisdom, the government changed that to 21. Which means that kids who have their fingers on the atomic weapons in a war zone can't have a beer with their dinner. This sounds hysterical. And all the kids, not all the kids, I'd say 90% of the kids at Fredonia, from time to time, drink. And what you've done now is make criminals out of them. People who are scofflaws, who who don't trust, don't believe, and are not observing the law. What do you think of that change?
Well, you know, again, my job is to enforce the law. I have a tendency to agree with you that if you're able to vote and you're able to go into the military and fight, you should be able to drink alcohol. However, the law says that it's 21. I think that as a society, we attempt to pass legislation that's going to protect our kids, and I understand that. However, at the end of the day, you are also sending kids when they're 18 off to college, and they're going to make those decisions on their own. So, you know, how do you protect them and yet give them the freedoms to start to act like adults? It's a difficult sort of decision, and certainly we all can recognize that Fredonia State students that are 18, 19, and 20 years old, a majority of them are probably drinking alcohol and
Sure.
attempting to obtain it in an illegal fashion, and are probably drinking it on premises that are less safe than a bar.
Yes, it's very similar to the statutory rape laws, which in many states is 18 before a woman can say yes. She's a junior in college. In New York State, it's 17, which means she could be a freshman in college, and she's not smart enough or knowledgeable enough to say yes. What kind of craziness is that? Meaning that any kid, male has sex with her, including Romeo and Juliet's in high school, is a felon, for God's sake.
Very difficult for us. In reality, people would think that it would be easier, but you have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, or you have, you know, a certain age group that are consenting. They're
Sure.
both engaged in the activity, and yet New York State says it's a crime. We obviously are mindful of that in the prosecution, and we take a look at it, and we interview people, and we try to make dispositions that are fair given the facts and circumstances of the case. But I would juxtapose that with the fact that sometimes you also get a 45-year-old and a 17-year-old, which clearly through his
age discrimination, right?
well, maybe through his manipulation was able to convince her that it was the right thing
Well,
to do.
17-year-old is legal game, isn't it, in New York State?
Yeah, it's 17 or 16 and under.
16 and under,
right.
yeah. Well, whatever. At this point, we're running out of time. I want to give you just a few minutes, a few seconds, 30 seconds, to sort of close off, Dave. This is your time, and I certainly want to thank you. You're on.
Well, I want to thank you as well. I always have a pleasure coming on. It's always interesting to come speak about things that I oftentimes don't get to speak about. But as always, you know, I want everyone to know that we're doing everything we can through my office to hold those responsible for committing crimes, use our discretion. If anyone has any questions regarding a particular case, or anything that's going on that I might be able to be helpful with, I certainly encourage them to contact my office. I can't
Telephone.
753-4241. I can't guarantee that I'll get back to you right away, but I will get back to you, or someone in my office will. I think it's part of my job to be answerable to the public. I think it's my job to help educate the public on what we do, and I encourage anyone who wants to contact me to contact
Thank
me.
you very much. Dave Foley will come back soon.
Whenever you want.
Okay, well, we have some hardball questions, and you handle them beautifully. And you are doing a good job.
Thank
From
you.
Everybody I hear, especially since you're being cut back mercilessly.
Thank you.
Chuck Kelsey, I want to thank you. What a job this guy does. Devin Taylor, Chris Bart, Randy Bart, Chris Ramaker, Jeff Zook, Don Zenz, and John Hamels. All these folks. Sorry, last caller, we didn't get you in. We were on a train of thought. Dave will be back. May all that is proud and true and noble abide with you. I'm Reed Powers.